Hello, welcome to Dav Chat. I'm Davina, and thanks for tuning in. And thanks to anybody who's a regular listener and who's missed me. Thanks to any replay viewers and to anyone just tuning in. Today, I have a lot to talk about. There's Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, and the newly revealed by the Washington Post emails that indicate the extent to which she was contacting Republican legislators in the Arizona state legislature to demand that they throw out the electors for Joe Biden that found their place because Joe Biden won the election, the federal election at the state of Arizona level, and replace them with a clean slate of electors, meaning electors for Trump, meaning overthrow the standard procedure for federal elections, which means insurrection, which means participate in a coup, whether it be the legal component of the coup and also knowing that her husband was ultimately called to be part of the rulings on the legitimacy of some of these efforts to overthrow the election results. Now, America has a complicated election system, which mercifully is not run at a federal level, it's run at a state level. I say mercifully because Trump was the president of the United States a few years ago, and if it was under his control, he would have been able to steal the election results relatively easily. There would have been fewer players to try and persuade to break the law. Whereas because it was at state law, we had a lot of different people's consciences that the insurrectionists had to try and bulldoze through. So Ginny Thomas's emails are part of the evidence of this fairly broad plot, fairly disparate plot to render American democracy null and void, to make American democracy a show pony whilst Republicans seized power, using Trump as a fabulous, not distraction, a fabulous focal point whilst all of these shenanigans and criminal activity and flagrantly anti-constitutional behavior was occurring. So Bob is cutting grass, but may not comment. Thanks for being here, Bob. It's nice to see you. So the breaking news is about John Eastman. We know he's an attorney. He spoke at the January 6th rally, and in a late night court filing last night, he revealed, in an effort to persuade a judge that his communications with Trump deserve attorney-client privilege and the privilege of being part of government deliberations, that these communications with Trump should be protected and he shouldn't have to disclose what he talked about whilst he was trying to come up with a persuasive legal framing to legitimize the Republican coup, the efforts to overthrow Joe Biden's election victory and install Trump for an unmerited second term, in contrast to the will of a majority, not only a majority of American voters, but also a preponderance of voters at a state level via the Electoral College system, which, let's never forget, was instituted to give disproportionate weighting to the votes of people inhabiting relatively small, more rural states as part of a bid to compromise with and reassure wealthy white slave owners who feared the growing political power of abolitionists at the time of the founding of America, at the time of the writing of the Constitution. That's why the Electoral College exists, not to help the little guy out, it's to help the little states out, because they had a higher proportion of rural areas with wealthy agricultural landlords, wealthy agricultural business owners whose businesses either directly involved or benefited from being adjacent to the slave economy. And we need to recognize that historical context is ever more important for us, particularly white people who tend to remain oblivious to these type of things. The push to entrench systematic white favoritism to push America more towards an ethno-state where white Christian nationalists are favored and cannot lose that privileged position, even if America diversifies more in a population sense and certainly seeks to mitigate that increasing ethnic diversity of America's composition by introducing reproductive coercion at a state level, by overturning federal protections and the constitutional justifications to say, yes, for privacy reasons, women deserve to pursue medical treatment in the pursuit of bodily autonomy, whatever they need, whatever they feel they need. Those rights are constitutionally enshrined as ruled in the Roe v. Wade case in 1973. They want to overturn that, increase the number of babies that people have, in the hope that bringing in more white babies will mitigate against any potential migration from countries where non-white skin is the order of the day, and also that any increasing numbers of brown or black skinned babies born as a product of denial to reproductive choice, that they would easily be able to have their voting rights taken away, to be politically disenfranchised, because Republicans have been increasingly getting away with a lot of excuse me, a lot of autocratic moves at Republican-controlled state legislature level, whereby they've introduced measures that may pass on the surface to people not looking for this sort of evidence, but to close examiners, it is clear that Black voters are being disenfranchised, that methods that they use to access the voting system, to access the polling booth, to access their rights as American citizens, is being targeted for elimination. So if Black voters are using drop boxes, those drop boxes are being taken away. If Black voters have benefited from more polling booths, then it's ensured that there are less polling booths to increase waiting times, particularly in areas where there's a high demographic concentration of Black voters. And these have been statistically backed up by researchers who have found that average waiting times for people residing, for voters residing in Black dominant areas, those voting times are significantly longer than people residing in majority white areas. All right, am I talking too quickly? I've only got Bob at the moment, but I'm glad you're there, Bob, and I hope the Lord is getting mowed. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope to have some replay viewers as well if people want to tune in. I promised also to get to elongate. Elongate is actually a word meaning stretched out, but in reference to Elon Musk right now, it refers to Business Insider breaking a news story that a flight attendant for his SpaceX was first of all encouraged by her superiors to get masseur credit, become an accredited masseur, so she could give massages to Elon Musk, and that one time giving Elon Musk a massage, he removed the sheet that was concealing his genitals, his private area, produced his penis, and should I have a warning on this? Content warning, description of sexual harassment, including accurate biological terminology. Elon Musk exposed his penis to the flight attendant allegedly, and offered to buy her a horse. I bet she'd mentioned that she rides horses, and that's what people do if they're trying to persuade you to prostitute yourself when they have no reason to think it might be in your value system. They're going to try and find your price. So interestingly enough, the timeline of this is being exposed as Elon Musk was contacted for comment on the story that was about to break. Elon Musk immediately went to Twitter and announced that he was now going to vote Republican rather than Democrat, claiming to have previously voted Democrat, that he was switching his voting allegiance, and that he was expecting all manner of stories to discredit him to break following this revelation that he, Elon Musk, was now a proud Republican. What excuse did he give? I don't even remember. It wasn't valid. Elon's full of stories, and I'm going to bring up this great thread that somebody just introduced that showed something that's wrong. And they said, look, in 2013 or 15, we're going to go through this thread. 2015. Okay. I'm going to make this bigger so that people can look along if they so choose. E.W. Niedermeyer. He is the author of Ludicrous and host of something called the Autonocast. Interesting. So I don't know what the Autonocast is, but I'm going to presume it's a podcast. So he decided on a whim in 2015 to check out Tesla's battery swap station that was earning the company 9 figures in California ZEV credits. So he's talking about a government subsidy scheme to reward renewable energy or to reward things to reduce fossil fuel use. So he found when he visited Tesla's battery swap station that it wasn't real. Instead, Tesla was using diesel generators to charge cars. And he said, here's how this changed my life. Now, that is a big discovery for a journalist to make. That is a big claim. Big claims require evidence. Let's continue reading. He said, up to that point, I had been skeptical that any startup automaker could succeed. That view wasn't about Tesla, it was about the car biz. But what I found at Harris Ranch in California was shocking, a cockroach. And I decided to follow a life-changing instinct. There is never just one cockroach. So journalists are like investors, but instead of their money, they bet their time and effort. What I saw at the battery swap station was so at odds with the image of Tesla in 2015, I knew there was a good chance investing in scrutiny of Tesla would pay off. It did. Oh, so that's his book called Ludicrous, The Unvarnished Story of Tesla Motors, which lays bare the disconnect between the popular perception of Tesla and the day-to-day. Well, so that's his book about some cockroaches he found. And there's been other cockroaches since. There's been the cockroach of multiple Black employees of Tesla filing lawsuits against Elon Musk for racist ways of operating his workplace, so that the jobs with the worst conditions were apparently disproportionately awarded to employees of color, including Black employees. So he said, a year later, I found another big cockroach. Tesla was hiding defects by requiring customers to sign non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, in exchange for free repairs. This cut off the auto safety regulator's only independent source of information about defects. So the auto safety regulator relies on customers to tell them if there's faults, so that they can build up a big picture of which car manufacturers might be problematic, where there's fault patterns. And instead, Elon Musk offered freebies, free repairs, but you have to sign an NDA about any defects. So, i.e., betray future customers for this advantage to yourself, for this gift of free repairs if necessary. So that led to a couple of important lessons, says E.W. Niedermeyer. He says, first, Musk's key skill is controlling information. It's not just crafting appealing narratives about himself and his companies, but also silencing anything that contradicts them. Tesla's entire history is lined with NDAs, backed by sheer terror of what Musk will do when cornered. And I'm going to add a point here. You don't even need sheer terror. Humans, I'm not going to call them lazy. Humans act to conserve energy. So sometimes we'll follow along with the lowest common denominator of least effort. What do I have to do or agree to avoid getting in trouble, upsetting the apple cart, just to avoiding disturbances in my life when I can avoid it? So offering people a gift and getting them to sign an NDA could appeal to this lowest common denominator of, sure, I don't want any trouble. And it reminds me very much of Donald Trump, who also marketed himself. Many people have commented on his self-marketing, self-promotion skills. And I've talked a lot about how he was able to use those self-promotion skills to attract loans, to commit white-collar crimes, misrepresent his own wealth, misrepresent his own level of business success and business acumen, into defrauding banks by persuading them to give him bank loans that weren't actually a good reflection of his business output, his levels of profitability, or his successes. He was misrepresenting his successes and his assets. He inflated his assets to attract more loans, to be given more money that he would then later on fail to pay back. And he would then misrepresent by reducing the appearance, the value of his properties and his assets in order to minimize his tax burden. And he would get lots of people around him to sign NDAs. So he didn't just promote himself. Donald Trump was also very good at controlling the flow of information. And as we can see, this journalist is outing Elon Musk as a similar controller of information. So the journalist says the terror of Musk and violating these NDAs comes from another lesson. Musk doesn't refute, he attacks. I learned this after the NDA story when an official Tesla blog post accused me of fabricating the reporting and doing so for financial gain. Zero evidence was offered to support this attack on my credibility. What happened next taught me another lesson. Musk fans don't care about facts. I was mobbed by online attacks that could not be dissuaded or mitigated by facts. My claims had evidence and his didn't, yet hardly anyone knows my reporting, and his 2016 lies are still repeated today. So Musk knows the stickiness of someone prepared to go on the offensive. And I'm going to attribute this to the human tendency to project. If we don't think of ourselves as liars or people who can easily break the social contract by deceit, then we likely project that quality when we look at other people. And we presume other people don't lie. We presume that it's too high a social and psychological cost to just nakedly misrepresent things, particularly if you're not just going to lie by omission. We presume people are not capable of active lying. And that's true. People have to be pretty advanced down the sociopathy, psychopathy spectrum to have the audacity to go hard with big lies, to actively lie, to actively attack people on the basis of no evidence, to fabricate smear campaigns out of whole cloth. And because of our reluctance to accept that people actually do that sometimes, we'll often look for reassuring bits of smoke and tell ourselves, oh, well, there's no smoke without fire. I'm sure they have a reason behind that attack. And it reminds me of the old ways of determining truth through virtue of dueling, to say, oh, look, let's let two people attack each other, and whoever's the most passionate about it is clearly the person with the highest degree of righteousness, so they will win, and that will determine the outcome, and that will also determine who we support as having a plausible case, who we determine as having credibility. Because if the strength of your desire helps you take another person's life, then yep, you win that duel. You have established your version of events as being the dominant one, and we will credit you as having a moral victory as well as purely a physical victory. All right. Make the thread smaller, but still I'll keep referencing this journalist. Okay, so he was surprised that Musk fans don't care about facts. Does that ring any bells? Who else does that remind you of? That's right, MAGA fans. MAGA fans, very fact resistant, very emotionally invested in the concept of a Übermensch hero being Donald Trump or Michael Flynn. They want to pledge their loyalty to a movement led by a person. And that isn't even ideological blindness, because it doesn't have to have an ideology per se. That is autocracy, because it's single person centric movement. And the ripple effect of Trump's autocratic tendencies, his fascist use of exploiting pre-existing community levels of racism, obviously higher in some communities more than other, and also negligent passive racism, where other people tolerated Trump and the media failed to report on the destructive significance of what Trump was doing. That is to say, exploiting and amplifying racist sentiments and a racist framing of the world, which denigrates migrants, denigrates refugees, denigrates people of color, and creates a sense of community through hate. So yes, you get to all experience commonality and triumph of overriding the social stigma of racism, to celebrate racism and to celebrate building a community through the empowerment of indulged racism. That's a good sentence, and I'm going to write it down. The empowerment that arises from jointly indulging in irrational racism and white nationalist rhetoric. It's white nationalist rhetoric to claim that there are authentic Americans who are somehow more worthy. White nationalist rhetoric. Okay. That the status quo shouldn't be budged because, hey, if people have had privilege for being white, that shouldn't be talked about or challenged. That's fomenting antagonism between the races. So you shouldn't point out some structural inequality. You shouldn't point out structural problems. That makes me want to also check something, because I just posted a meme that I really want to share. Here we go. This is the thrust of my broadcast today. This is the thing that I most want to communicate to people. Here we go. White supremacy. Oh, and it's courtesy of an account called Michelle B. Young, who I follow on Twitter. And she was replying to someone who was commenting on an article about the Buffalo massacre, in which a Black community was specifically targeted by an 18-year-old man with access to lethal weaponry. I will say unconscionable access to lethal weaponry, because I don't think it's right that someone who had previously been questioned by public officials because he had made a remark threatening to shoot up his school. So he was interviewed and detained overnight by officials. I think it was the FBI. What's his face? Peyton Gann. I don't even know his name. That's irrelevant. What is relevant is Black people are trying to point out, or just wait for people to recognize, that yes, that was an act of domestic terrorism in which specifically Black Americans were targeted. And the fallout of domestic terrorism is the emotional component, as well as the tragedy of 10 people losing their lives, and all their family members and all their loved ones and community more broadly experience that ripple effect of corrosive grief. And corrosive grief to feel targeted by a fellow countryman, a fellow citizen of the country that we're supposed to peacefully share, to be moving towards a more peaceful union. And the other 13 people who were also injured, whose lives are changed, who are impacted. They can feel that they've survived, but lead fragments can remain in people's bodies after gun injuries, which can take years off their life expectancy, because not all fragments can be removed by surgery. Some are lodged and it would be too disruptive to have an operation to remove them. And lead can leach into people's body systems and impact on their brain functioning. There's lots of really incredibly negative consequences as a result of the pandering to white supremacist rhetoric that you can hear any night of the week on Tucker Carlson or his colleagues at Fox News, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, etc., but very recognizably on Tucker Carlson's show. So this meme says, white supremacy won't die until white people see it as a white issue they need to solve, rather than a black issue they need to empathize with. So it's not enough to buy a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, put up a Black Lives Matter sign. You could try starting with sympathy, but the important thing is to recognize that we have to get more adept at challenging the ideology of white supremacism and reintroducing a stigma that Trump removed. So not just being content to say, oh, you're racist, I'm not, but to acknowledging the degree to which racism is interwoven into a lot of American institutions and a lot of American day-to-day life. And the more we promote recognition of that and show that we can simultaneously be psychologically strong, healthy people and not consumed with guilt and despair because we're so sad to be white. If we show we can be okay with being white, but resolute enough to address the ongoing problems with systematic pandering to white supremacists, and that everybody should be emotionally invested in defeating white nationalists, because the pattern of history is that predicating a national violent movement on the idea of supremacy of one race over another or one skin color over another leads not just to yay, hooray, wealth generated by slave economies, but to massive moral injuries and then ultimately to war. So slavery in America, yep, lots of wealth for people, but then civil war because some people's consciences could no longer countenance slavery, reached a critical mass, and then you had the South prepared to go to war to defend their right to continue generating money off the back of enslaving human beings and having industries adjacent to the profits of that slave economy. And so they were too addicted to that method of wealth generation to be able to countenance a growing abolitionist movement from the North. And I'm not saying everybody in the North is free from racism or was free from internally disparaging the humanity of Black people, but there was enough contention, was enough of a contentious issue to make it a civil war. And people on the right side of politics, or even people in the middle, who try to diminish the significance of this issue and say, well, the real problem is people talking about race, that's a contributing part of the problem. And in fact, I'll see if I can bring up a pyramid that conceptualizes white supremacy as having a pinnacle, but also a lot of supporting planks at the bottom, different methods of being and acting that prop up a white nationalist system, that prop up elements of white supremacy to make it play such a big role in our life. And the problem with white supremacy that extends even beyond the problem of racist harms is it also tends to compound sexist problems as well. So people who indulge their addiction to subjugating others and gaining unfair advantage at the expense of others and restricting competition at the expense of others, those people also want to keep women out of the workplace and women away from positions where they can compete with men or force men to work harder or fear for their job security more. Instead of celebrating the economic boost that women give to the workplace when they participate, there's a whole Christian white nationalist extremist movement that wants women to be denied bodily autonomy, reproductive choice, and to not have any recourse easily available recourse for medical treatment if they have any number of conditions for which abortion is the requisite treatment. If you've got a septic uterus, you need an abortion. If you've got an ectopic pregnancy, you need an abortion. If you have a miscarriage, you need an abortion. And it's the Republican race to the bottom that involves people challenging each other on how pious they can be and trying to outdo each other in different American states and introducing legislation that harms women, harms all women, but that harm is concentrated amongst women without the means to easily escape oppressive state legislation and leave. So the people who are stuck, who have no choice, the people who can't organise the childcare, who can't be flown out of the state, who can't evade Republican measures to restrict pregnant women from leaving the state. Those are the women who have to bear a child against their will. Those women whose bodies are now subjugated to the Christian extremist beliefs of the Republican legislators who have passed that legislation in saying no abortions under any circumstances, perhaps some exceptions to save the life of a mother, but no, if you want to reject the idea that somebody can force you to become pregnant through a violent act of rape, nope. If you want to say, a young girl who's been the victim of sexual abuse within her own family and who has fallen pregnant as a result of incestuous abuse, nope, that child still has to proceed with a pregnancy because the religious elevation of a fertilized egg or a zygote or an embryo or a fetus to an elevated status that can compete with the rights, the individual sentient human being rights of a girl or a woman who's been alive for a period of time, who's taken breath and has a developed consciousness, you can lose out on the right to get the medical treatment you need to stay alive because of that fabricated pretend devotion to the unborn. And I'm calling it out as pretend and fabricated, even though I'm sure there are a lot of people who feel very genuine in their protective instincts and their ideological devotion to ending legal access to abortion. I've seen it described that conservative women who have abortions can berate doctors and nurses who help them and call them terrible people, even as they're trying to hold their hand through a procedure that they're having done to themselves, because they believe their circumstances are exceptional, whereas they still want to decry the overall practice of allowing women to have abortions. So yes, they should be able to get an abortion, but everybody else is unworthy and has been irresponsible. So it's evidence of a very dysfunctional and maladaptive way to externalize judgment and blame on other people. Everybody else is imperfect. You're great. And that shows how religion sometimes foments a type of narcissism. So the benefits of it can be enough self-love to help you get through the day. The downsides is some forms of religion, some religious branches can definitely have ideological habits that promote rigid, narcissistic behaviors on the part of their congregants. So people who are very judgmental of others, don't try to relate to other people, and always excuse and celebrate their own circumstances, and always attribute bad motives and poor, lax practices to other people. All right, so white supremacy won't die until white people see it as a white issue that they need to solve. We need to come together to solve white supremacy, white people, and not just dismiss it as, oh, yep, I've exhibited some sympathy. I'm not actively racist. That's as far as I need to go. No, we are all losing. We are all more in fear, particularly women, particularly people who are gay, particularly people who are trans, a lot of minority groups are actively losing because of the successes, not future successes, present successes of the Republican Party in depriving Americans of their rights, increasingly encroaching on the civil rights and the constitutionally protected rights of American people. All right. What did Ginny Thomas say to Mark Meadows? Do not concede. It takes time for the army who is gathering for his back. This email is for patriots only, friend. You've been identified as one of President Trump's fiercest and most loyal defenders, and according to your donor file, you make an excellent addition to the Trump army. When you become a member of the Trump army today, we'll give you access to our never-before-seen limited edition camo Keep America Great hat. The president wants you and every other member of our exclusive Trump army to have something to identify yourself with and to let everyone know that you are the president's first line of defense when it comes to fighting off the liberal mob. These limited edition American-made hats are for Trump army members only, so do not pass this information on to anyone. Shh. Don't tell them about this great deal. Please contribute $35 or more right now to join the Trump army, and we'll send you your very own camo Keep America Great hat. Wow. So that's the type of thing that they send to the type of people on Trump MAGA mailing lists. And that shows how you can deploy psychological tactics to keep people invested in the MAGA movement, to make them feel special. The deals are exclusive, personal appeals. You've been selected and found to be valuable. You'd make an excellent addition to the Trump army. Use of militaristic language to help excuse and promote violent behavior and support for violent movements, similar to Hitler's brown shirts in pre-World War II Germany. Lots of encouragement of buy-in at different levels for irrational but very energizing rhetoric. Join us. Enjoy the spirit of being in something with other people. Find a community of like-minded, hateful people. We'll all hate the same people together. Don't you just love togetherness? And if they're against us, they hate America. So buy in today, just $35, which we may or may not continue to deduct from your account on a monthly basis. But don't forget, you get this limited edition camo Keep America Great hat to show that you support President Trump and you're willing to turn up to the Capitol on January the 6th in body armor and whatever else you need to attack any police officers with enough civic duty and good conscience to try and stop you from ransacking the Capitol, killing elected Democrats such as Nancy Pelosi and even Republicans such as Mike Pence in an effort to remove the obstacles to us overthrowing the government and establishing a tyrant whom you believe to be the center of the earth and the chosen person. All right. So Ginny Thomas was part of the movement to militarize Trump supporters. Yes. What about the email she sent today? I'm looking at Carl Griffin. He's an executive producer from MSNBC, and he really does a great job of talking about the news of the moment. So yes, he points out that Ginny Thomas, wife of Clarence Thomas, plotted to overturn the results of the presidential election, and then Clarence Thomas ruled on cases related to those election results. And she pressed Arizona lawmakers days after the 2020 election to set aside Joe Biden's popular vote victory and electoral college victory and choose a clean slate of electors. Well, I guess in the days after means, yeah, she is trying to do this before it was even announced that Joe Biden, no. Oh, I'm not going to be signed in as to my Washington Post account here, but that's all right. I can see a free. I've got to sign in. Okay. And then I've got to remember my password. All right, I can get them to email me a password. It's going to be a disaster. I'm so grateful that Bob is here. It's one of my son's favorite names, Bob. All right. Why not play something while I'm doing this? A federal judge in Kentucky has issued an order extending a prohibition on enforcing provisions of a new state law that abortion providers say amounts to a total ban on the procedure. Okay, so a federal judge in Kentucky is prohibiting enforcing a new state law that is effectively a total abortion ban. So thank you, federal judge, for at least momentarily halting enforcement of that new law. Abortion clinics in America are going to be swamped because a lot of them are going to have to close down in states that are passing this legislation. The Supreme Court's shown its hand. It's working on its draft proposal to overturn Roe v. Wade, and that's going to be emboldening a lot of anti-abortion people. There was an account on Twitter yesterday that said someone was in a Facebook group and a woman went to the chemist to get a mifepristone prescription filled because she had a miscarriage that hadn't completed, a missed miscarriage, I think is the technical term. And the pharmacist had to talk to the doctor for about 30 minutes with the doctor defending the prescription and explaining it wasn't for an abortion, it was for a woman who's had a miscarriage. And if you don't complete that miscarriage, using medication to complete the process, then you can die. You can get an infection, you can get sepsis, you can have a heart attack from your body's response to an untreated infection or to an infection that's been allowed to rage out of control in your various organ systems. The new White House Press Secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, says the Oklahoma abortion bill is part of an effort by ultra-MAGA officials. They are starting with reproductive rights, but the American people need to know that other fundamental rights, including the right to contraception and marriage equality, are at risk. That is a very important point. People do need to be aware of the escalating multi-pronged efforts to erode the rights of American people, residents and citizens. So the right to marry whom you want, whichever consenting adult you want, likely to be the next thing to be challenged because the legal decisions that protected abortion in Roe v. Wade was an interpretation of the Constitution that said there is a right to privacy enshrined in law in the United States. And when that right has been challenged, the right to privately pursue and marry an adult, a consenting adult whom you love, is on shaky legal grounds. The right to choose a birth control of your own choice. Again, you can be subject to state legislation that says, no, we're in a race to see which of us is the most pious and to best uphold the fundamentalist evangelical tenet that says sex should only be for reproduction and you can't have recreational sex anymore. You can't have access to popular contraception methods. Every time you have sex as a consensual adult, you have to be playing Russian roulette with your fertility. You have to be prepared to bring a baby into the world that you may also not choose to terminate. So make some more white babies, people. that we've got some audio footage of that, actually, of one Republican. So there's different Republicans sticking their heads above the parapets to sort of signal that they're pursuing these extremist legislative positions. And it's to be hoped that the American public can put two and two together, and that enough ordinary people feel cranky enough about it to put in some opposition. Trump suggested in a White House meeting that the Michigan Secretary of State should be arrested for treason and executed. There was no bottom to how far he and his supporters were willing to stoop. I hope some of those death threats have diminished, but in a way I doubt it. I think they're just concentrating on school board officials now, as well as the people who were standing in the way of Trump's ambition to overthrow the election results. And the January 6th committees had obtained a batch of official White House photographs, including images taken on January the 6th, 2021. The previously unreported cache may provide the committee with real-time visual evidence of Trump's actions and movements. We've got photographs, potentially, of Trump's actions and movements. The Las Vegas Sun, a publication that is honest about the fact that it can't currently find Republicans willing to stand up for democracy. As it stands right now, this is the quote, voters are faced with a slate of GOP candidates nearly across the board who aren't fit for elective office because they buy into the big lie. There you go. A group formed in the hope of disbarring lawyers who worked on cases which Trump tried to overturn the 2020 election, has filed a complaint with the Texas Bar Association seeking to disbar Ted Cruz. He definitely played a significant role in helping to foment insurrectionist rhetoric in that time period after the election was decided in Joe Biden's favor, but he probably helped even before then, because they were laying the groundwork to seek to overturn the election. They were filling their followers' minds with the idea that the election would be stolen because of the measures taken to facilitate voting in a pandemic. So the mail-in voting measures, the drop box measures, all of these measures to safely collect votes from Americans when there was a contagious airborne disease and no vaccination strategy at that point. That is what they were doing. Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley. And the first US flights to get formula to the US will start as soon as this weekend. The aircraft will transport the equivalent of 1.5 million 8-ounce bottles of 3 formulas. Okay, good. All right. I'm concerned that Democrats have put a lot of money into an opponent for Marjorie Taylor Greene, because people hate Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's a seditionist, but it's a very red area, and the Democrats are unlikely to win. So long shots are possible, but the amount of money that's being poured into a campaign it doesn't matter. I'm not gonna. Do you know what? I saw a conservative advocating that Democrats vote in the primary campaign. You're apparently allowed in Georgia to vote in the primary election of an opposing political party, and that there's another candidate running against Marjorie Taylor Greene who, I don't trust Republicans, but I trust Marjorie Taylor Greene even less. I think she will actively advocate for insurrection, and I think she's quite a dangerous person. But you know what? I'm going to leave that to people with more experience and expertise in that area. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene being awful. I'll have a listen. I say awful. That's going to sound a little bit emotional, isn't it? Emotions are what we use to motivate us.
They broke our country, and it's very difficult to get it back on track. But here's the real deal. Let me explain some of the other problems. WIC, the government program, is the largest buyer, the largest customer for baby formula in the United States of America. And now Joe Biden and his administration, they're moving into their solution is making WIC an even bigger customer, when in reality, many of the parents that can't buy baby formula for their baby, they're not on the WIC program. And the WIC program is making it more difficult for them to buy baby formula, because if you're on WIC, if you're someone that needs to be on that government assistance, you're allowed to buy as much baby formula as you want to with your WIC vouchers. And they're increasing that for those parents. But if you're not on WIC, you're limited in how many cans of baby formula you're allowed to buy.
All right. So WIC means Women, Infants and Children. It's a program to help people not have babies starve to death. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is just trying to imply that government help for people who lack means is in fact depriving other babies. All right, it's that pie approach. Some pie for you means less pie for me. But people with more means can often travel to different stores, but people who are extremely impoverished can't travel to the stores often, or can't travel as far afield. And so that's why they're less likely to have purchasing limiting restrictions on them. And that's just sense. All right. And WIC apparently even has limitations. A voucher will be good for 3 containers of formula per month because it's meant to be supplemental. So, okay, so that just completely invalidates Marjorie Taylor Greene's entire argument. The Trump-backed candidate for an election in Senator Perdue in Georgia. So is that a primary? So David Perdue is down a lot.
Her campaign has gone off the TV airwaves. The former president has not come in for a final rally, and you are down by 30 percentage points in the polls. What's happened to your campaign?
Well, first of all, where'd you get the 30 points?
Fox News poll.
Right. Where'd they get it from?
Are you not down 30 points?
No, hell no, I'm not down 30 points. Let me tell you why. They talked to 800 people.
Blah, blah. Fox Polls is not just a poll of Fox audience members. They actually have a reputable polling company that does their polls. So they have credibility.
But first, a quick story to tell you about the great state of Colorado. One of the leading candidates for the Republican nomination for governor in that state is former Colorado Mayor Greg Lopez. Like so many other Republican candidates for statewide office this year, Greg Lopez is an election denier, but when it comes to undermining democracy, Lopez wants to do a lot more than just question the results of past elections. Today, Denver 9 News' Kyle Clark was first to report that Greg Lopez has a new plan to stop counting all votes equally and do away with the popular vote in Colorado. Under Lopez's plan, Colorado would develop its own state-level electoral college, giving more power to rural conservative voters and less power to urban and suburban Coloradans under the guise of counting votes based on turnout.
So he's using the racist rural conservative white pandering of the electoral college system, and he's trying to extrapolate from that and apply it to voting within the state of Colorado. So at least it highlights the dysfunctional nature of the electoral college system by shrinking it down to the macro level and seeking to apply it to Colorado voting. But yes, it will also be disastrous for politics at the state level of Colorado. And if he gets away with doing that, then that process would be repeated to use the conservative pandering nature of the electoral college system. So you can't have one vote, one person, one vote anymore. Okay.
I wonder why he'd want to do that, is Denver 9 News' Kyle Clark.
Democratic Governor Jared Polis's 10 percentage point win in 2018, it would turn into a blowout Republican victory under Lopez's plan. a 28-point shift toward Republicans, so long as you don't.
Okay, 28-point shift towards Republicans if you implement, hey.
The 9 News' Carl Clark.
A 28-point shift toward.
So if you implement an electoral college system at a state level, you get a 28-point shift away from Democrats towards Republicans because you are weighting the votes of people in white conservative areas more. You are white weighting the voting system.
Toward Republicans, so long as you don't count each vote equally.
So long as you don't count each vote equally. US states are supposed to be laboratories of democracy. But if election-denying Republicans win power this November, they may quickly become laboratories of autocracy.
And in fact, there's a book published by that name, Laboratories of Autocracy by David Pepper, which I haven't read, but I should probably get on that and I'll write it down because it will help me get better at describing to other people what is happening in the United States and what kind of threats people are under and how the conservative ruling class has gained such purchase over the system of democracy in America, both in the past and in an expanding and escalating way going forwards. Here's Michelle B. Young, so you can see that's what her Twitter account looks like. If you want to follow her, Michelle_B. Young. She says, I am a goddamn delight, which is awesome. The majority of white people do not care. White supremacists might be a minority, but the majority of whites are apathetic or feel like it's not their problem to solve. Until the anti-racists fight as hard as the racists, we won't make more progress. Right, apathy is killing us.
But first, a quick story to tell you about the great state of Colorado.
Thank you, Mehdi. We heard you. All right, so let's not let white apathy kill us, subjugate us, or deprive us of access to political power. Okay, let's not let minoritarian Christian extremists, white nationalists defeat us. Let's make sure we use what power we have now. And we do have some power. We need to get energized and buy it more. Ooh, I know. I also was just posting about someone who was describing how to shift things through framing. Okay. Dang it. Okay. Some researchers, Tara Goddard, KM Ralph and co., found that replacing victim-oriented crash language in reference to accidents where a driver of a car strikes a pedestrian. So changing the language from pedestrian struck by car to driver strikes pedestrian has a massive intensification outcome of changing public perception and then changing political pressure. So does news coverage of traffic crashes affect perceived blame and preferred solutions? Evidence from an experiment. So they were able to show at a qualitative level, quantifiable level, that when you change how you frame some reporting on a topic, you change people's emotive responses, and that way you change the potential level of reaching a critical mass of public pressure on a topic. So this topic is with regards to traffic crashes, and there's a lot of room, there's a lot of need for action, not a lot of room for improvement, a lot of need for action to improve pedestrian safety and to improve public acceptance of a need to be angry about it and push for better outcomes. So how can you force change? Writes David Zipper, who is a visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School focused on the future of cities, tech, and mobility. He says, media veterans told me that coverage shifts when people raise a ruckus. That's what happened at Washington Post several times last year, notably after 5-year-old Allison Hart was struck and killed at a DC crosswalk. So she was killed, and then there was this reporting, and people, it hit a nerve. People were like, okay, this reporting is too bad to tolerate. A 5-year-old girl was hit by a vehicle and killed in the district. The girl was riding a scooter or bicycle. It was not clear if the child was accompanied. Also unclear is why the child was in the roadway. There's a lot of details included here as if to give people an opportunity to distance themselves, to, if there's a balance between anxiety and anger, to say, oh no, I don't need to feel angry. I don't need to feel anxious. That's just happened to somebody else. Maybe they were unaccompanied. Maybe why were they even in the roadway? We don't know. These details are unclear. The reporting is giving me lots of pegs, lots of opportunities to emotionally distance myself from the situation. So that way I don't need to be angry and I don't need to be anxious. This reporting provides me, the reader, with emotional insulation from this incident. Now, reporting that emotionally insulates you might be clickbait technique. This is a service we're going to offer for our readers. We'll let them feel like they're still staying engaged with the world. Look, things are happening. There's this thing that happened, but here's also some details to make sure the news doesn't make you feel anxious or upset or angry. So yep, you're not going to feel anxious, and you're also not going to feel angry. You're not going to advocate for change. You're not going to call your legislators and say we need more pedestrian crossings. We need the laws to be changed. We need there to be more driver education about pedestrian safety. You're not going to advocate for any of those things if you are emotionally numbed by the media supplying you with all of these details that provide emotional insulation. And I'm going to write that down because it's important. Media can provide emotional insulation with regards to potentially upsetting topics. But that can also numb people and diffuse the impetus for political action. Pen's not working. The impetus for political action, for change, and for lives to be saved in the future. All right. So that reporting sucked, and people got mad. And people raised a ruckus, and people contacted the Washington Post. Let's have a look. There are encouraging signs that media norms are starting to evolve, like the AP suggestion to use crash instead of accident. Crash assigns more possibility for blame. Accident is a term that implies no responsibility. Oops, accident. Can't hold me responsible. I'm sorry, it was an accident. Yeah. Crash leaves the possibility open for investigation, for potentially adverse findings for the driver, and potentially findings for legislators to require action. So thank you to that journalist who did that. Why do so many news articles about crashes feel like they were, what's the headline? Oh, there was an online headline in the link that disappeared when I actually clicked on the link. It just said now news organizations need to relearn how to cover car collisions, especially when the victims are on foot. And that's true, because it is a key part of political change and for better consequences. And the article opens with an account of The truck driver jumping the sidewalk, pinning a 46-year-old under the vehicle. The driver remained in the truck, spinning its wheels and rocking it back and forth for nearly 5 minutes. A passerby stopped and told Ortiz Dominguez to get out of his vehicle, but he did so only when the police arrived. By then, Savaria Alvarez was dead. We saw these details because a television journalist chose to investigate. I saw the Alexandria police tweet about it, but the police report was terrible. The report stated that the incident involved a single vehicle striking a pedestrian, and that while the pedestrian died, the driver of the vehicle remained at the scene and sustained no injuries. When faced with that vague report, the reporter went to the crash site. I could see skid marks on the sidewalk. When we found out that Saravia Alvarez wasn't crossing the street, that changed the whole complexion of the story. He said the police report gave no indication that the driver was at fault, that the victim was just a pedestrian walking on the sidewalk. Carey approached a nearby vape store, which offered her security camera footage of the collision. He played it for us on a big screen in the store. The story about the crash aired on November 15, 2 days after it happened. In a follow-up segment, Carey noted that an autopsy indicated that Savaria Alvarez had survived the initial impact of the collision and that the rocking of the truck likely killed him. Oh my God. This reporting is notable because it was exceptional. To find out the basics of what happened, Carey had to examine skid marks and obtained security footage because that information existed nowhere else. Oh my gosh. So the driver of the truck just stayed in the car trying to drive forward while there was a pedestrian trapped underneath after he had mounted the sidewalk. And the Washington Post ran a brief story about the incident, stating that Saravia Alvarez was hit by a car, not a truck, and that the police said the driver stayed on the scene and was not hurt. The Post's account of the collision in Alexandria drew criticism, including from me, especially since it was not the first time the paper had produced skewed coverage when a pedestrian or cyclist died in a crash. Last September, when a driver fatally struck 5-year-old Allison Hart while she was biking at a crosswalk in DC, the Post account initially claimed it was unclear why the child was on the roadway, a victim-blaming framing that was also widely criticized. A local public radio reporter accused the newspaper of crap reporting. These problems go deeper than a single reporter or even the Post itself. After the death of a city bike rider in 2017, the New York Times cited police in an article stating that the cyclist had swerved to go around a parked van prior to being struck and killed by the driver of a tour bus. Now look, this is all very interesting to me, and I'm going to circle back to something else just so I can quickly wrap up this broadcast. Also pointing to Bob's Bob's note, which says people can order baby formula on Amazon by just switching from the US page to the California page. And there are supplies of formula that can be obtained from Canada, and that circumvents the trade obstacles that Trump signed off on a trade agreement, making it more difficult for the commercial importation of formula, baby formula from Canada. But you can personally import it from Amazon, from the Canada Amazon, because that's not commercially importing it, that's just personally importing it. So that's a solution for anybody with the ability to pay for postage from Canada for whatever Amazon charges to import formula that way. And so I imagine that might help some people. I've enjoyed this broadcast. I know it hasn't been widely attended to. Oh, I see this article is stirring some anger amongst DC folks. RE Washington Post crash coverage or lack thereof. Two things. I wish I could share Post Local's response, but they declined. Oh, that's the subset of the Washington Post, but they declined multiple invitations to comment, and these problems extend to many other newspapers too. And yes, they use the passive voice to avoid assigning responsibility. So look, women often complain about rape culture and talk about how you can avoiding victim blaming is important and taking allegations seriously. And I've decided that feminism's kind of annoying me at the moment, just in terms of the subset of feminists that are very, very stubbornly, very obdurately defending Amber Heard, even after being exposed to a lot of evidence, particularly if they watch the trial, a lot of evidence showing that her crowd of witnesses are all people who financially benefited from their association with Amber Heard, who lived for free in Johnny Depp's penthouses, and who appeared to have engaged in a conspiracy in which they fabricated evidence, lied about what was visible in the apartment, lied about what was visible on Amber Heard's face, and didn't know that the 4 attending police officers would not only testify under oath that they had seen no visible injuries to Amber Heard's face in the days before she obtained a temporary restraining order against Johnny Depp, but also that one of the officers was wearing a body cam and insisted on going into the apartment, showing that they took the implication of domestic violence incidents seriously. They insisted on going into the apartment, and the body cam recorded no damage to the apartment, no overturned anything, and so that the pictures that they took afterwards of damage appear to have been fabricated. And lawyer woodworking people on YouTube have also gone through the allegations that Johnny Depp broke part of a wooden bed off whilst in the course of assaulting Amber Heard, and they've shown that the wood fibers, that it's very difficult to get a large part to break off a wooden bed frame with a boot because it's still blunt. You need a pointy, sharp thing that can break the fibers and use leverage to cause a big wooden splinter to be removed from a wooden bed frame in the way that Amber's photo depicted. And sure enough, the picture that they took of that bed and the damage sustained to the bed also had a pocket knife buried in the folds of the sheets, a visible metallic pocket knife. And that was first a YouTube video allegation from a lawyer and woodworker, and then made an appearance in the court cross-examination of Amber Heard. Did I see the new Musk scandal? He was fixing customers' cars for free if they signed an NDA, so customers didn't complain to the government. Yes, so that there was no record from the Auto Regulation Authority, no ability for anybody to collect data on how much the Tesla cars required fixing. So evading oversight, evading industry regulation, and just basically violating either the law or the spirit of the law, right, left, and center. Because I did a big discussion at the beginning, going through a journalist thread, a journalist who wrote a book called Ludicrous that went through Elon Musk's skill set, like Trump, in controlling information, dominating narratives, and being willing to attack if challenged, not just to aggressively attack people who point out holes in their stories and poor practices and criminal activity. And that ability to command attention, to engagingly sell a false narrative, that can be, that ability to take advantage of whatever public profile they have and use it to build a bigger profile. That's how this man's work was discounted when he wrote a book about the flaws that he saw with, not just flaws, the deceitful practices that he saw. So you're hearing about the NDAs. This author, E.W. Niedermeyer, also found when visiting Tesla's battery swap station that was earning Elon Musk 9 figures in California credits. This is state-level government subsidies from California, which is one of the wealthiest economies in the world. Elon Musk was getting millions of dollars, 9 figures. Yes, because 6 figures is $1 million, and you have to have 6 zeros, so that's 7 figures. Okay, 7 figures, 1 million, tens of millions, 9 figures, hundreds of millions. Okay, so some kind of hundreds of millions figure of credits. I don't know what a ZEV credit is, and I will look it up. ZEV. Oh my gosh, the estimate so far is that he's earned 2.8 billion collectively in ZEV credits. And what are they? What are ZEV credits? We know they're going to be some form of government subsidy from the ZEV program assigns each automaker ZEV credits. Automakers are required to maintain ZEV credits equal to a set percentage of non-electric sales. Okay. So credits depend on the type of ZEV and its battery range. So it's going to be Z something electronic vehicle. Oh, zero emission vehicle. Okay. Zero emission vehicle program funding and encouraging the adoption of electric vehicles in order to reduce dependencies on fossil fuels and hence reduce the likelihood that mankind will face increasingly dire consequences from a out of control escalation in global temperatures, causing an ever more expanding sequence of extreme weather events that render people homeless, destroyed property, economic damage, loss of life, injury, loss of pets. You know, the type of things that you hear about, the devastating type of things. And I can glibly say that because I haven't ever had to live through a devastating weather event myself, or you'd see more emotion from me. But I can understand that there's a lot of emotion associated with people who have lived through an extreme weather event, and that more and more people are living through extreme weather events. And that even though as technology develops, there are ways in which highly developed nations can mitigate against the losses of extreme weather events such as fires and hurricanes and tornadoes that are all exacerbated, that are all turbocharged by increasing temperatures, to say nothing of rising sea levels that threaten to destroy various Pacific Island nations, or lots of island nations, destroy coastal properties, make properties uninsurable on the coast. Lots of consequences, some with more potent human costs than others, some with more economic costs than human life costs, but all different degrees of severity, but many highly concerning and very problematic consequences. Bob's on tornado watch here in New Jersey. Ooh. All right, so I've had that baby formula tip up on screen for a while. Thank you, Bob. All right, well, 2 listeners, thank you. I wanted to circle back from going from Elon's ability to control information. I wanted to say that Amber Heard has upset a lot of people by making a lot of the public complicit in an abuse cycle of Johnny Depp, that we granted her credibility because people who don't compulsively lie will project that quality onto others and assume that if somebody makes an allegation that they're telling the truth. So it's not just the Me Too movement that asks everybody to just believe another human being. That's what a lot of us instinctively do. Someone tells us something, if there's not an obvious motivation for them to lie, we say, okay, that could be true. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt and assume it is true. So some people, when Amber Heard first made allegations against Johnny Depp, said, well, she's a gold digger. We're going to ascribe our financial motivation to her and dismiss her allegations. And so she countered that suspicion by saying, I don't want anything. I intend to donate the entirety of the divorce, the $7 million divorce settlement, evenly between 2 charities, the ACLU and the Los Angeles Children's Hospital. And she said she had done that in numerous interviews because she went on an interview tour, and that was all to diminish the impact That was to control the flow of information around what were the circumstances of her divorce. But it wasn't true. She didn't fulfill those pledges. She was receiving the divorce settlement in stages, but she didn't continue with payments as those settlement payments progressed. And there was one period where she had the entirety of the $7 million, a 13-month period, but she had ceased to give donations. So she'd given $100,000 of a $3.5 million pledge to the LA Children's Hospital. She'd given, I think, $350,000 to the ALU. And Elon Musk continued to make donations towards her pledge for her to $350,000 donations. So I think $700,000 in total from Elon Musk, who was her romantic partner after her marriage ended, but probably also before, because there's video footage of Heard taking Elon Musk up to the penthouse apartments that were Johnny Depp's property, as well as James Franco. So my problem with that is to say we need to recognize that abuse has no gender and that it deters male victims of abuse from disclosing their abuse, making allegations, seeking help, and seeking support if we strengthen that narrative of Believe Women. Believe Women carries with it a destructive imputation of disbelieve men. Even if it's not intentional, that is a consequence. Believe women, disbelieve men is the other side of that coin. So I want to say, I always thought it was a bad slogan that too readily dismissed the possibility that women can have a motive, individual women can have a motivation to deceive. It's some researchers say it's very uncommon for women to want to deceive or gain advantage. But you know what? I'm not even prepared to take their word for it. There could be benefits in custody disputes, even though women may have very legitimate reasons for wanting to retain custody of their children in an abusive relationship. Lots of reasons. But the point is, automatically believe all women, not a useful construct, implied construct of automatically disbelieve men. And that is hurting I believe, male victims of violence, as well as the construction of masculinity that says might is right and stronger people in a relationship can't possibly be the victims of violence from a female. And it's not really that might is right determines who is the abuser. It doesn't matter who's physically stronger. If somebody's reluctant to respond violently, and a less physically strong person but more aggressive person is willing to use violence, then they are perfectly capable of perpetrating violent acts against somebody who's unwilling to defend themselves, who's unwilling to act aggressively in a reactive way. And I feel that's what's happened to Johnny Depp. Even though there's audio footage of him responding aggressively to Amber Heard, the big picture of those audio recordings is of Amber Heard repeatedly berating, taunting, and undermining him and gaslighting him that the violence she'd inflicted on him didn't count as violence. Oh, I didn't punch you. I'm sorry, I don't know what the motion of my actual hand was. I'm sorry if I didn't use a proper slap. But babe, you're not punched. You're such a baby. That's the difference between you and me, Johnny. You're such a baby. That's me just having heard quite a lot the audio extract of a conversation between Heard and Depp, which helped me to form the opinion that yes, Johnny Depp had been the victim of significant physical abuse by Amber Heard, as well as significant emotional abuse as well, trying to discourage him from framing violent assaults as violent assaults. She preferred to frame them as a natural response to him betraying her by splitting or by leaving the scene of an argument, which she was escalating. So that's from me. I stand with Johnny Depp. I await a just outcome in the court system, and I believe that the jurors have, in the current court case, have been alienated by her, by the lies pushed too far, by the dedication she has exhibited towards reframing everything in a way that serves or is congruent with her own version of events. So even when she's being asked about very straightforward facts that are supplemented by a lot of evidence, she goes, I dispute that characterization. I don't frame it that way. Yes. Did I say I donated the money already? Yes, but I pledged it. So that means I donated it. Did you donate it? I pledged it. She's very firm with her, very aggressive with her efforts to yank the narrative away from the lawyer cross-examining her, and to always present herself in a way that says she didn't use drugs. She compartmentalized her husband into someone who she loved and she wasn't afraid of, and had a separate box for the man who apparently brutally sexually assaulted her and physically assaulted her multiple times over their relationship, but she still stayed with him because she loved him. Nothing to do with the fact that he was supporting her and her friends in a series of penthouses, and that she was hoping to presumably continue to abuse him until he either took his own life, or allowed her to instigate a divorce at some later period in time where she might be entitled to more things, because 15 months of marriage, she claims it would have entitled her to a lot more than she got, but $7 million did seem, in the court of public opinion, to be a reasonably generous amount for that small period of marriage. So I'm really grateful that Johnny Depp had the perseverance. And I think this could be good for abuse victims if we can tell them, and if they feel themselves that it's been helpful seeing a man with enough of a support network and financial resources to be able to take this to court, that even if you don't take it to court, you can still do some of what Johnny Depp did to preserve himself, document things and find people to back you up. And even if you are struggling with addiction or struggling with mental and emotional difficulties, even if you have depression and anxiety and your self-worth is in the toilet, grasp at the straws that people offer you, the people who care about you, the people who you might have excluded from your life because somebody has been abusing you so much it's been driving a wedge between you and them, because they can see and are alienated by the self-destructive tendencies you're exhibiting because you're caught in a cycle with a narcissistic abuser or somebody who's just really an emotional vampire and feeding off of your life spirit to advance themselves and either their career or their financial circumstances or just their own joy in their ability to manipulate another person. So Johnny Depp was able to leave the relationship with Amber Heard. He was able to, even though allegations were made against him that destroyed his career, ended his work prospects, his ability to star in the next Pirates of the Caribbean movie, took him out of the J.K. Rowling movie where he was playing the villain. He was in the Crimes of Grindelwald. He was Grindelwald. And I was really looking forward to seeing him in The Secrets of Dumbledore or whatever was the next movie, but he was removed from it. They had no choice, really. J.K. Rowling had supported him through the first round of the restraining order taken out against Depp, but she couldn't, and the producers couldn't leave him in the next Harry Potter movie once Amber Heard's Washington Post op-ed came out that was ghost written, but that they were exploiting Depp's profile by implying that she had been victimized, was a victim of sexual violence, implying that Depp was the person who had inflicted sexual violence against her, and that she had suffered as a consequence. It was time to examine how institutions protected men. And then it was untenable for him to remain in that role in that movie anymore. So he lost his career, he lost his opportunities to exercise his talent as an actor, to tell stories that people bond with and connect with. He lost a lot. He lost a lot. I'm sure not just in monetary terms, but in self-respect. And his children were being bullied at school because people were saying, your dad's a wife beater. You can imagine it would make things difficult for a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old if their father is credibly accused in a publication with a lot of credibility around the world. The Washington Post, very reputable, top tier print publication, saying, yep, we are allowing Amber Heard to publish this op-ed that the ACLU helped her write because they wanted to highlight domestic violence issues using the celebrity amplification factor of Depp's involvement, Depp's implied involvement. So even though his name isn't mentioned, the time frame is consistent with when she was with Depp, when she applied for a restraining order against Depp. I would love it if some of the Depp fans could just tune in for this part, because I'm sure they'd enjoy it. Not just Depp fans, but justice for Johnny Depp fans, people who want Johnny to receive justice and who want to unwind all of the conscription of public sympathy into Amber Heard's court, to unwind that and say, no, we support a man who has been defamed and whose life's work has been unraveled, whose children have suffered because of a woman and her friends who evidently engaged in a conspiracy to deceive police, to fraudulently obtain a restraining order, to manufacture bruises that weren't then visible by other people who had close contact with Amber, to manufacture evidence about a bed being broken, to manufacture evidence about an apartment being in disarray when that wasn't observed by wasn't visible on a police body camera footage, and a lot of pre-work put into taking pictures of Johnny Depp falling asleep, with the future intention of framing him as a drug addict, with the idea of then attaching an implication of he took so many drugs, he then turned into a monster. So even if there aren't witnesses to monstrous behavior, we can just capitalize on public distrust of drug users and say, well, clearly he was, even if you didn't see it. Abuse is often carried out in private, so take my word for it. I'm an attractive white woman, actress, celebrity, and also just I'm a person making an allegation. And we automatically assign credibility and sympathy to a person making allegations of abuse. It's often women, because it sounds like there's a bunch of men who've been targeted by domestic abusers in their personal lives who haven't felt empowered to ever publicly make an allegation or ever seek resources for help that might be available for them to be encouraged and psychologically supported to leave a toxic situation. So hopefully that improves, and hopefully Johnny Depp's perseverance in trying to rehabilitate his reputation and his standing by at least platforming his version of events, which is very different to Amber Heard's and is very much more substantiated by evidence. It's to be hoped that that benefits people out in the real world. Thanks for listening, Bob, and anybody else who's periodically tuned in. I'll see you all next time, and take care. Bye. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and each other. And yes.